Stop. Before you scroll past this, before you tell yourself, this isn't for you, I need you to hear something that heaven has been holding back until right now. They didn't just want to hurt you, they wanted to rewrite you. Think about that. Because most people believe the attack was against their peace, against their finances, against their health, against their relationships. But that was never the real target. The real target was your nature. They needed you bitter. They required you to become cold, calculating, manipulative, a mirror of every dark thing they poured into your life. The betrayal wasn't the weapon. The bitterness it was designed to produce, that was the weapon. And here's what will shake you to your core. Heaven is not amazed by what they did to you. Heaven is stunned, standing in holy silence, because you were hit with enough darkness to corrupt a generation, and you did not become dark. You were lied on, excluded, gossiped about by people who broke bread with you, spiritually ambushed, emotionally bled dry. And still, you kept your heart soft before God. That is not human strength. That is supernatural architecture. This message is for you, the one who knows exactly what it feels like to be rewritten from the inside out by someone else's agenda, and chose God anyway. If this message is finding you at the exact right moment right now, type "I stayed pure" in the comments below. Because before this message is over, you will finally understand why your refusal to become evil, that quiet, costly decision you made in rooms where nobody saw you, may be the very thing that changed what heaven is releasing into your life next. The attack was never only against your peace, it was against your purity. And heaven is stunned not by what they did, but by who you still are. Now let me take you somewhere most preachers are afraid to go, because what I'm about to say isn't just spiritual theory. This is an expose. This is an operation being uncovered right here, right now, and when you see it clearly, everything you've been through is going to make a terrifying kind of sense. The betrayal was not a mistake. The false accusation was not random. The family member who misunderstood you for 20 years, that was not a personality clash. The gossip that spread through your church, your neighborhood, your family reunion, that was not just human weakness. It was a campaign, organized, targeted, spiritual, and it had one goal that had nothing to do with hurting you. It was designed to change you. Think about that for a moment. Every wave of emotional neglect, every act of deliberate disrespect, every character assassination disguised as just being honest. Every time someone weaponized your kindness, your silence, your faith, it wasn't random cruelty, it was strategic pressure applied to one specific pressure point, your nature. Because the enemy is not afraid of a person in pain. He is terrified of a person in pain who still chooses God. So he doesn't just try to wound you, he tries to infect you. He throws poison through repeated pain, hoping it soaks deep enough into your soul that you start drinking it willingly. Like smoke poured onto white cloth, not trying to burn it, just stain it. Like mud thrown into a clear river, not trying to stop it, just cloud it. And here is the trap he laid with surgical precision. If I cannot destroy you, I will reshape you. If I cannot stop your calling, I will contaminate your spirit. He needed you cynical. He needed you suspicious of everyone who tried to love you. He needed you addicted to distance, that place where you keep everybody 10 feet back because the last person you let close nearly killed something in you. He needed you numb to tenderness, hostile in your speech, and secretly a little pleased when the people who hurt you started to suffer. That last one. Did that land? Because that quiet flicker of satisfaction when someone who wronged you starts to fall apart, that is not justice. That is the poison doing its work. That is the infection spreading. And the enemy knows it. Because the moment you begin to delight in another person's pain, even the pain of someone who genuinely wronged you, you have started to become what wounded you. Romans 12:21 says it with no softness at all. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Not tolerate evil, not survive evil. Overcome it actively with good. That is a warfare posture. That is an offensive move. And most people in your position, after everything that was done to them, most people surrender that ground without even realizing it. Look at what the pain was actually building in the people who hurt you. The one who betrayed you, someone betrayed them first. The one who spoke about you behind your back, someone defined them by gossip before you ever arrived. The one who shut you out emotionally, they had been shut out so many times that walls became their language. They didn't choose darkness freely. They became it, because they never found a way out. And the wolves who came for you, they were not born wolves. They were lambs who got bitten so many times they finally learned how to bite back. And then they practiced. And then it became their nature. And then they came to you, trying to teach you the same lesson. Chosen one, that is the real war. Not what they did to your reputation, not what they took from your finances, not even what they did to your peace. The real war was the campaign to make you unrecognizable to yourself, to make you look in the mirror 10 years from now and not see the person God built, but see a quieter, colder, more guarded version of your attacker. That was the assignment they were unknowingly carrying. And here is what has heaven in awe of you right now. You felt the pull. You know you did. There were nights you wanted to retaliate and your hand was on the door. There were mornings you woke up and the bitterness was right there, waiting like a coat you could just put on and wear forever. There were relationships where cruelty would have been so much easier than grace, but you didn't fully surrender your soul to that infection. You don't have to be perfect for that to be miraculous. You just had to resist enough to still be standing on the right side of your own soul. If you've ever felt like the real attack was on your heart, not just your circumstances, let that settle in right now. Share this with someone who almost lost themselves inside their own pain, because in a few minutes I'm going to show you exactly why staying soft under sustained pressure is not weakness. It is one of the rarest, most devastating forms of spiritual warfare that exists, and heaven has been watching you wage it in silence for years. Now let me shift the atmosphere in this room, because what I'm about to tell you isn't about the people who hurt you. It's about what you did when nobody was looking. And this chosen one, this is where your story gets holy. The test was never public. Nobody gave you a trophy for it. No congregation stood and applauded. No family member even knew it happened. But heaven had a front row seat. And what God watched you do in private has been recorded in detail that would make your hands tremble if you saw the full transcript. Let me ask you something nobody has ever asked you directly. Do you remember the night you typed that message and deleted it? The one where you finally had the words to destroy someone who deserved it. You had the receipts. You had the screenshots. You had every right to expose what they did to you. And you sat there, fingers hovering, and you put the phone down. And you cried instead. Heaven watched that. Do you remember the morning you woke up and your chest felt like someone had parked a car on it? That heaviness that had no medical name. You couldn't explain it to your doctor. You couldn't even explain it to yourself. It was spiritual warfare pressing down on your ribcage, trying to suffocate your faith. And instead of cursing God, you whispered, "Lord, I don't understand this, but I still trust you." Heaven recorded that. Do you remember the name you still brought to God in prayer, even after what they did? Not the polished, composed prayer you said at church. The raw, broken 2 a.m. prayer you prayed on your knees on a cold bathroom floor. The prayer where you were weeping so hard the words barely formed, but you still said their name. You still asked God to help them. Heaven wept at that. Psalm 56:8 says, "You have kept count of my tossings. Put my tears in your bottle. Are they not in your book? Every tear, counted, bottled, recorded by name, by date, by the exact weight of the pain that produced it. God did not lose the file on your suffering, He archived it. Now here is what will stop you in your tracks. Most people think God measures holiness on Sunday morning, when the choir is singing and the spirit is high, and choosing righteousness is easy. But that is not when God measures purity. God measures purity at midnight. God measures character when you have a legitimate reason to be evil and you choose not to be. Joseph had 17 years of legitimate reasons, thrown into a pit by the brothers who should have protected him, sold like livestock, falsely accused by a woman whose lies nearly erased him, forgotten in prison by a man he helped. Every day of those 17 years, Joseph had fresh reasons to harden, fresh reasons to plot revenge, fresh reasons to curse the God who seemed silent. But Genesis 39-21 says, even in prison, the Lord was with Joseph, not because life was fair, but because Joseph kept his heart right when life was everything but fair. Job had a legitimate reason. The man lost his children, his wealth, and his health in a single sequence of catastrophic days. His own wife told him to curse God and die. His closest friends sat across from him and told him God was punishing him for secret sin. Job had every theological, emotional, and relational reason to walk away. Instead, he said, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust him." That is not human strength. That is the rarest substance on earth, faith forged in a furnace with no exit sign. David knew it too. He had Saul's life in his hands twice. Twice, chosen one. He was in the cave, in the darkness, blade ready, and the man who had tried to murder him was asleep right there. His own soldiers whispered, "God has delivered your enemy into your hands." And David stepped back. He refused. He said, "I will not stretch out my hand against the Lord's anointed." Nobody saw that in the cave. No cameras, no congregation, no applause. Heaven saw it. And then there was Gethsemane, Jesus, on his face in the dirt, sweating what the doctors say was blood, a medical condition called hematidrosis, triggered by extreme anguish. He was not performing strength, he was fighting for it. "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me," complete honesty, complete agony, and then, "Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done." The most powerful sentence ever spoken in private. No audience, just a father, just a son, just a choice that saved the world. Chosen one, if nobody around you understood the battles you fought in private, if nobody clapped for the tears you swallowed, if nobody ever acknowledged the names you forgave in silence type, God saw it in the comments right now. Because heaven kept record of who you were when nobody clapped. Let that land. Heaven kept record of who you were when nobody clapped. Your private endurance was not wasted. Your hidden goodness was not invisible. Your silent faithfulness was not forgotten. It was building something. Something invisible to human eyes, but unmistakable in the spirit realm. And here is where this message becomes even more serious. Because your purity did not just preserve your heart. It produced something. Something that the enemy cannot steal, cannot counterfeit, and cannot stop. Something that heaven is now ready to release into your life in a way that will make even you stand back in stunned silence. Stay with this word, because what God built in your hidden seasons is about to go public. Let me tell you something that most preachers will never say out loud. Suffering is one of the greatest teachers on this earth, but it is a dangerous teacher, because suffering doesn't just teach pain. Suffering teaches strategy. And the strategy it most often teaches, the lesson it has discipled millions into, is this. Become hard. Become cold. Protect yourself by becoming exactly what wounded you. That's not a theory. That is what happens to human beings under pressure. You've seen it. You've watched people you love go into the fire warm and come out frozen. People who started their lives full of grace, full of generosity, full of trust, and after enough betrayal, enough loss, enough silence from heaven, they came out the other side unrecognizable, bitter, suspicious, controlling, locked behind a wall so thick that even God had to knock hard to be heard. Suffering discipled them, and it discipled them away from God. Now here is where heaven stops. Here is where the angels go quiet and lean forward. You went through the same fire, and you came out different, not perfect. Don't misunderstand, this is not about perfection. Purity is not the same as flawlessness. You stumbled. You had dark nights where the anger nearly won. There were moments you came dangerously close to becoming what hurt you. Don't let anyone cheapen this message by making purity sound like something innocent children wear. This is not that. This is battle-tested holiness. This is the purity of a soldier who had every weapon to destroy and chose mercy instead. Romans 12:21 says it plainly, "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." Paul didn't write that from a comfortable room. He wrote it from prison, from beatings, from betrayal inside his own ministry. He knew what it cost to choose good when evil was easier. He knew the price tag on that verse, and he wrote it anyway. Think about a tree that has been hit by every storm for 30 years. Hurricanes, ice, drought, lightning strikes, every season trying to kill it. And yet in autumn, that tree still produces fruit. Sweet fruit. Fruit that didn't absorb the bitterness of the storms. That is not ordinary botany. That is a miracle. That is you. Think about gold inside a furnace. The fire is so intense it would melt iron. But gold doesn't absorb the ash. Gold doesn't come out dirty. The fire burns away everything that was never gold, and what's left is purer than when it went in. The furnace didn't corrupt the gold. The furnace revealed it. That is what heaven is looking at when it looks at you. Now, let me get specific, because this message needs to land in the real rooms of your real life, not in some abstract theology. They lied about you. People who sat at your table, people who knew your secrets, who knew where you were tender, who used your own testimony as ammunition against your reputation. And the natural response, the human response, would have been to lie back, to dig up everything you knew about them, to weaponize the truth the way they weaponized it against you. Did you? They excluded you, quietly removed you from rooms you built, conversations you should have been in, decisions that affected your life made without your voice. And the natural response would have been to make noise, to become controlling, to manipulate circumstances, because you could no longer trust anyone to include you fairly. Did you? They drained you emotionally until you had nothing left to give. And the natural response, the response that protects what's left, is to go cold, to stop feeling, to build walls so high that love itself can't get through, because love has been used as the door through which pain always enters. Did you close yourself off completely? If your answer is no, if somewhere in the wreckage you kept trying to forgive, kept trying to love, kept refusing to rejoice when they fell, kept your conscience intact even when your heart was shattered, then you need to hear this verdict spoken over you right now. You did not let suffering disciple you more deeply than God did. That is not a small thing. That is a seismic spiritual achievement. That is the thing that has heaven standing at full attention over your life. Because most souls that go through what you've been through, they get taught by the pain. Pain becomes their pastor. Trauma becomes their theology. And they start to live by its doctrine. Trust no one, expect nothing, strike first, survive at any cost. But you chosen one, you kept going back to a different classroom, even when your knees were bleeding, even when the answers didn't come. Even when God felt 10,000 miles away, you kept showing up. You kept your motive clean. You kept your tongue from becoming a weapon of mass destruction. You kept the fear of God alive in a soul that had every reason to let it die. Proverbs 4:23 says, "Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life." You guarded it. Not perfectly, but you guarded it. And now, right now, purity under pressure doesn't just move heaven emotionally. It qualifies you for something spiritually. Do not click away, because what comes next explains what your restraint has done in the realm of the spirit, and why God is about to move in your life in a way that will make everything you suffered make complete and sudden sense. Before you go, 1 second further, type in the comments, "I did not let pain rename me," because the next revelation will show you exactly what name heaven has been calling you all along. Now I need you to lean in close, because this is the part nobody tells you. Everybody talks about what you went through, the betrayal, the exclusion, the sleepless nights, the whisper campaigns that tried to bury your name before you even walked into the room. But nobody ever stops to ask, what did surviving all of that actually produce in you? Your pain didn't just leave scars, it left substance. Let me show you exactly what I mean. Think about an olive, sitting on the branch, beautiful, untouched, full of potential, but locked inside. The oil cannot flow until the olive is pressed, and the harder the press, the purer the oil that flows. That is what happened to you. They pressed you. Betrayal pressed you. Rejection pressed you. Isolation pressed you. Years of being overlooked, talked about, spiritually exhausted, that was the press. And here is what heaven saw coming out of you that stunned the angels. It was not poison, it was oil. Isaiah 61 says, God gives beauty for ashes, but the ashes have to exist first. The burning has to happen. And you, chosen one, you burned. You burned in rooms nobody else saw. You burned in private, in silence, on your knees, in the dark. And what came out of that fire was not bitterness, it was anointing. That is the first fruit of your purity, oil. Not loud oil, not flashy oil, quiet oil, the kind that makes grown people inexplicably calm in your presence. The kind that makes strangers in grocery store checkout lines pour out their deepest pain to you because something they cannot name tells them this one is safe. That is not coincidence. That is consecration. That is oil flowing from a vessel that was pressed but never poisoned. Now here is where it gets even more powerful, because staying pure through all that pain produced something else in you that most people never develop in a lifetime. Discernment. You know what I am talking about. You feel it. That sharp, quiet knowing in your gut when something is wrong, even when everything looks right on the surface. When a smile and a spirit do not match. When the words sound right but the energy underneath them is crooked. You did not get that gift from a book. You did not get it from a seminar. You got it the hard way by being lied to by someone whose eyes told you the truth 6 months before their mouth did. By being manipulated by someone who used your own testimony as a weapon against you. Heaven sharpened your perception through the very attacks that were designed to destroy you. David knew this. He had a front row seat to Saul's madness, close enough to watch the king's face twist with jealousy, to hear the rage in footsteps coming down the corridor, to feel the shift in the room before the spear even left the hand. 1 Samuel 18 tells us that David behaved himself wisely in all his ways, not angrily, not bitterly, wisely. That is what suffering without corruption produces. It produces a man, a woman, who can read the room at a level that has nothing to do with education and everything to do with experience forged in fire. Ask yourself honestly, how many times have you walked away from a situation before it exploded because something in your spirit said, leave? How many times have you sensed danger in a person 3 weeks before everyone else saw it? How many times has that inner knowing, that voice that whispers this is not right, saved your life, your family, your peace. That is not age. That is not luck. That is the fruit of purity tested under pressure. But the third fruit, the third thing your purity produced, this one will shake you. Holy authority. Not loud authority, not position, not titles. Something far more rare and far more feared by the enemy than any of those things. The authority that comes from a person who had every legitimate reason to become dark and chose light anyway. Think about Jesus on the cross, nails through his hands, crown of thorns crushing his skull, the very people he came to save screaming for his death. And from that cross, with everything in him having the right to call down fire and end it all, he looked up at heaven and said, "Father, forgive them." Those 3 words did not come from fragile innocence. They came from purified authority, from a soul so deeply rooted in love that even betrayal and agony could not uproot it. That is the model. And chosen one, you have been living that model. Every time you chose forgiveness when revenge was justified, you were building authority. Every time you walked away from gossip, instead of adding to it, you were building authority. Every time you stayed soft when the world screamed at you to harden, heaven was adding weight to your words, depth to your prayers, fire to your intercession. Think about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, thrown into a furnace heated 7 times hotter than normal because they refused to bow. And when the king looked into that fire, he saw 4 men walking, unbound, unburned. Daniel 3 says they came out, and the fire had no power over their bodies, not even the smell of smoke on their clothes. That is you. After everything they put you through, you do not even smell like smoke. And the enemy is terrified of you because of it. Here is what hell fears most. Not the untested, not the comfortable, not the people whose purity was never challenged. Hell fears the one who has been through the furnace and came out still worshipping, because that person's authority cannot be faked, cannot be manufactured, and cannot be stolen. Write this down right now. Seriously, pause this and write it. Pressure revealed what was in me, and by God's grace it was still oil. If this word is opening your eyes right now, subscribe and stay through the end of this message, because what is coming in the final sections is specifically for the one entering a season of holy separation and vindication. You do not want to miss what God is about to say about why certain people could not stay connected to you after this season, because your purity did not just produce oil, discernment, and authority. It became a mirror. And not everyone could stand what they saw reflecting back at them when they stood too close to your light. Let me ask you something that nobody in your life has ever had the courage to say to your face. What if you didn't do anything wrong? What if the reason certain people turned on you, the reason they whispered behind your back, withdrew without explanation, suddenly became your enemy after years of closeness, had absolutely nothing to do with your failures and everything to do with your purity? I need you to sit with that, because this question has been sitting in your chest for years, decades, maybe. You've replayed those moments over and over. What did I do? What did I say? Where did I go wrong? And the enemy has let you drown in that question, because as long as you're asking the wrong question, you'll never find the right answer. Here is the truth that will reorder your entire history. Your purity did not create their darkness, it revealed it. That's not a small statement. That's a complete reinterpretation of your story. Read it again. Let it reach all the way down. When you walked into certain rooms carrying a clean conscience, a genuine spirit, and a heart that had been through fire but refused to become fire, you became something those rooms were not prepared for. You became a mirror. And some people cannot stand their own reflection. John 3:20 says it plainly. Everyone who does evil hates the light, and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. Jesus didn't say they would debate the light. He didn't say they would politely ask it to leave. He said they would hate it, because light doesn't negotiate with darkness. It simply arrives, and everything hidden becomes visible. That was you. You arrived, and certain people saw themselves clearly for the first time in years, and it terrified them. Your restraint bothered people who had built their entire lives around reacting. When you stayed quiet while they expected you to explode, they felt exposed. Your silence wasn't weakness. It was a verdict they couldn't appeal. Your sincerity threatened people who survive entirely through performance. When you meant what you said, and said what you meant, it held up a standard they had quietly abandoned. They didn't hate your honesty. They hated what your honesty cost them. Your loyalty to God made people who had compromised their own faith deeply uncomfortable. Not because you judged them, you didn't say a word, but your prayer life alone, your quiet faithfulness, your refusal to cut corners in your walk with God, it was a living indictment of every deal they had made with convenience. Can I be direct with you? Some of you reading this right now have spent 30, 40, 50 years believing you were the problem in relationships that actually ended because you were too pure for them to manage. You blamed yourself for the exclusion. You apologized for the tension you didn't create. You shrank yourself, softened your faith, dimmed your fire, trying to make people comfortable who were never going to be comfortable around you. Not because of your flaws, because of your light. Think about Joseph. His brothers didn't throw him in that pit because he was wicked. Genesis 37:11 says plainly, his brothers were jealous of him. His dreams exposed the limitations of their own vision. His favor from their father exposed the poverty of their character. He didn't do anything wrong. He simply existed with too much favor for bitterness to ignore. They didn't attack his mistakes. They attacked his anointing. Sound familiar? Here is where I need to be careful, because this truth has an edge on both sides. Not every conflict in your life was spiritual warfare. Not every difficult relationship was persecution. Some bridges burned because they needed to. Some connections collapsed under the weight of genuine error, and part of wisdom is knowing the difference. But some rejection, the kind that came out of nowhere, from people who smiled at you on Sunday and stabbed you by Tuesday, that rejection had a spiritual signature. It felt disproportionate because it was disproportionate. It felt personal because it was personal. Not personal against your character, personal against your calling. Clean water always exposes the mud at the bottom. You didn't have to say a word. You didn't have to correct them, confront them, or compete with them. Your very existence, the way you carried yourself, the way you forgave when they expected revenge, the way you kept praying when they expected you to quit all of it, was a tuning fork pressed against the instrument of their life, revealing every note that had gone flat. And rather than tune themselves, they tried to break the fork. That is why they smeared your name. That is why they rewrote your story to people who hadn't met you yet. That is why the gossip was so specific, so targeted, because they needed to preemptively destroy your credibility before your light reached someone else and told the truth about them. But here is where heaven steps in. Proverbs 26:2 says, "An undeserved curse does not come to rest." Every word spoken against you without cause had no legal ground to land. Every lie told in rooms you hadn't entered yet, God was already in those rooms. Every character assassination attempted against your name, heaven kept the original file. You don't have to defend yourself. You never had to. But some of you have spent years, valuable, irreplaceable years, blaming yourself for what God was actually exposing. Stop. Right now. Let that go. The separation that hurt you was not abandonment. It was assignment. God was clearing your table to make room for what was coming. He was removing mirrors that showed you a distorted reflection and replacing them with people who could actually see you. But here is where many chosen ones make a critical, dangerous mistake. They survive the betrayal, They understand the exposure. They receive the revelation, and then they leave the door wide open. They think purity means permanent access. It does not. Stay with me, because what comes next may explain why the most painful separations of your life were not only necessary, but divinely orchestrated to protect something inside you that God refused to let them corrupt. Now I need to tell you something that your soft heart has been afraid to hear. Something the enemy has used your own gentleness against you to keep you silent about. Staying pure does not mean staying accessible. Read that again. Let it land. Because this right here, this is where the enemy has been hiding the second half of your assignment. You forgave them. Good. God honored that. You prayed for them. Good. Heaven recorded that. You kept your heart soft. Good. That purity is exactly what we've been talking about. But beloved, forgiveness is not a permanent open door, and this is the lie that has been draining you for decades. You have been confusing Christ-like love with Christ-like availability, and those are not the same thing. Let me ask you something, and I need you to sit with it. How many times have you swallowed your own peace to keep someone else comfortable? How many times have you re-explained yourself to a person who never intended to understand you? How many years have you kept a seat at your table for someone who used that seat as a weapon? And you stayed. Because leaving felt like sin. Because distance felt like bitterness. Because you were told that real Christians don't give up on people. But nobody told you that Jesus himself withdrew. Luke 5:16. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. The Son of God, the man who healed lepers and touched the untouchable, he withdrew, not out of bitterness, not out of failure, out of obedience to his own preservation. David didn't stay in Saul's palace to prove he wasn't bitter. He fled, he ran to caves, he put distance between himself and the man who was trying to rewrite his destiny with a spear. And God called that wisdom, not weakness. God met David in the cave, not in the court where the abuse was happening. The Apostle Paul, a man who preached forgiveness more than anyone, wrote in 2 Timothy 4:14, Alexander the coppersmith did me great harm. The Lord will repay him. Paul didn't chase Alexander down. He named him, warned the church, and moved on. That was not bitterness. That was the holy protection of purpose. Proverbs 4:23 doesn't whisper, it commands. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you flows from it. Above all else. Not above politeness, not above peacekeeping, not above other people's comfort, above all else. So, let me ask you the question nobody in your life has been bold enough to ask. Who has God been telling you to guard your heart from, and you keep unlocking the gate? You know exactly who I'm talking about. The one whose number you see and your stomach tightens. The one who leaves every conversation and somehow your faith feels smaller. The one who has been eating from your kindness for 20, 30, 40 years and has never once been changed by it. Chosen one, God does not preserve your purity so predators can keep feeding on it. Mercy does not mean volunteering for more destruction. That is not holiness. That is not humility. That is a wound that has been disguised as a virtue, and the enemy has been laughing every time you open that door again. Some separations are not bitterness. They are obedience. Some silences are not coldness. They are consecration. Some distances are not abandonment. They are divine protection, God himself creating margin between his anointed and the thing that keeps contaminating the well. I know what some of you are feeling right now, that familiar twinge of guilt, that voice that says, but what will people think? But they need me, but I'm supposed to love everyone. That guilt is not from God. God does not use guilt to keep you in harmful proximity to people who have repeatedly chosen to wound you. That guilt has a different source, and you know it. Jesus said in Matthew 10:14, if anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, leave that home or town and shake the dust off your feet. He wasn't talking about giving a fifth chance. He was talking about holy release. Shake the dust, move. God's mission does not stop because one person refuses to receive you. Neither does yours. You are not obligated to keep explaining your calling to people who are committed to misunderstanding it. You are not required to keep your spirit in range of people who have made a habit of diminishing it. You can love someone completely from a distance. You can pray for someone faithfully without sitting in their presence. That is not a contradiction. That is maturity. And once the separation is clear, once you honor what God has been telling your spirit for years, heaven begins the next phase. Not punishment for the ones who hurt you. You don't need to wait on that. Vindication. For you, the doors that kept closing, they start opening. The favor that kept getting blocked, it starts flowing. The assignments that kept getting delayed, they start activating. Because your purity finally has room to operate without being siphoned by people who were never assigned to your season. If you have been asking God whether distance is disobedience, hear this clearly. Sometimes distance is what obedience looks like. Write this in the comments right now. Peace can have boundaries. Because you are not walking away from love. You are walking into the next dimension of your assignment. And what God is about to release into that clean, protected, consecrated space you're creating, that is exactly what we're talking about next. Let me take you somewhere most people will never go. Close your eyes for just a moment and picture it a courtroom unlike anything built by human hands. The ceiling stretches beyond sight. The air hums with the weight of eternity. And in this place, every secret you ever carried, every silent prayer you ever whispered into a dark bedroom ceiling, every moment you swallowed your pain instead of swallowing your integrity, every single one of them has been recorded. This is not a metaphor. This is what Revelation 20:12 means when it says the books were opened. God keeps books, chosen one, and your name is in them. Now, here is what those books say about you. They called you weak because you didn't fight back. Heaven logged it as restraint under pressure. They called you foolish because you forgave people who never apologized. Heaven marked it as spiritual maturity beyond your years. They called you blind because you kept trusting God when nothing was working. Heaven stamped it as faith under fire evidence category. They called you defeated because the doors kept closing, the money stayed tight, the loneliness stretched long. Heaven entered it as preparation without compromise. Do you understand what I am telling you? Every single thing they used to diminish you, God placed into the record as evidence in your favor. You were not the defendant in this trial. You were never on trial. They were, and the case has already been decided. Here is what the accuser brought into that courtroom. He brought receipts. The moment they spread lies about you, he showed up expecting you to retaliate. The moment they excluded you from the table, he waited for you to grow bitter and start plotting. The moment they stripped you of your dignity, he bet everything that you would strip someone else of theirs. And chosen one, you never gave him what he came for. Every time, every single time. You walked back to God instead of walking toward revenge. You opened your Bible instead of opening your mouth to destroy someone. You got on your knees when the world expected you to throw punches. That restraint is not weakness. That is the most dangerous kind of power on earth, power under control. Proverbs 16:32 says it plainly. One who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and one who rules his spirit than one who takes a city. You didn't just endure them. You governed yourself in the middle of their chaos, and heaven watched every second of it. Now hear the verdict. Not weak. Proven. Not foolish. Faithful. Not forgotten. Preserved. Not defeated. Qualified. And this verdict doesn't come with a trophy and a crowd. It rarely does. Vindication from heaven almost never looks the way we imagined. It doesn't always arrive as your enemies publicly humiliated or your name loudly cleared. Sometimes it arrives as a morning where the peace that used to elude you finally settles on your shoulders like a coat that actually fits. Sometimes it looks like people who lied about you quietly removed from your life without you having to say a single word. Sometimes it's a voice coming back to you, your own voice, the one you lost somewhere in the middle of surviving. Sometimes it's a room full of people who suddenly respect you, and you never understood why until now. It's because God began signing your name in rooms you hadn't entered yet. Psalm 37:6 declares, "He will make your righteousness shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun." Not a candle, not a flicker. Noonday sun, that's the kind of clarity that doesn't need you to explain yourself anymore. That's the kind of authority that walks into a room before you do. That's the kind of dignity that doesn't ask permission to exist. Are you hearing this? Can you feel what is shifting in your spirit right now? Because here is the question I need you to sit with for 10 seconds before we go any further. What if everything you thought was costing you the silence, the forgiveness, the choosing God over revenge? What if all of it was never a loss? What if every single one of those moments was currency being deposited into a divine account that is now fully matured and ready to release? You weren't losing all those years. You were building something hell cannot touch, cannot steal, and cannot counterfeit, a character that has been proven in fire. And that is the final truth that changes everything. Your purity was not only about surviving them, it was about preparing you for who you are now becoming. Don't you dare leave before the final 2 parts of this message, because this is exactly where survival stops being the story and assignment begins. If this word is confirming a season you have been walking through alone, hit subscribe right now and stay anchored in messages that are built to strengthen you, not just move you. The sealed scroll of your life is open, and what God is about to read from it next will silence every voice that ever said you were finished. Look at yourself right now, not who the enemy told you that you were, not the version of you they gossiped about in rooms you never entered, not the broken one they expected to find after all those years of warfare. Look at who actually came out on the other side. Because I need you to understand something that most people will never hear in their lifetime. You are not who you were before this season. The pain changed you. But beloved, it did not change you into darkness. It changed you into something the enemy never saw coming. You came out more discerning, more anchored, more compassionate, less impressed by appearances, more dangerous to the kingdom of hell, and far more useful to God than you have ever been in your entire life. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. Have you ever noticed that after everything you've been through, you can now read people? Not perfectly, but deeply. You feel something shift in a room before anyone speaks. You sense deception before it announces itself. You recognize the wolf underneath the smile because you've been bitten before, and the scar taught you what the sermon couldn't. That is not coincidence. That is the divine gift forged inside a crucible that almost broke you. Proverbs 20:12 says, "The hearing ear and the seeing eye, the Lord has made them both." God doesn't give that kind of sight to people who never needed it. He gives it to the ones who walked through darkness long enough to learn how to navigate it. Now hear me on this, because this is where the church has gotten it wrong for years. People will tell you that age is decline. Culture screams at you that your best years are behind you. They put you in the corner. They hand you the rocking chair. They speak about you in past tense like your chapter already closed. But what if I told you that every single year you survived, every single season you endured without becoming cruel, every single morning you chose God over bitterness, it was all building something the young and untested simply do not carry yet? Because some people have charisma. They are loud, magnetic, impressive. But you? You carry weight. There is a difference, and heaven knows it. When you walk into a room, something shifts atmospherically, not because you perform, not because you announce yourself, but because a person who stayed pure through betrayal carries an invisible authority that no platform, no title, no seminary degree can manufacture. Your voice comforts differently. When you say God will bring you through, you're not quoting a bumper sticker. You are testifying from scars. People feel the difference. Their souls feel the difference. Your prayers hit differently. You have been in that secret place at 3 a.m. when the whole world was asleep. You have prayed with tears so heavy that words couldn't carry them, and heaven recorded every single one. Your presence exposes differently. Darkness cannot stay comfortable around someone whose heart stayed clean. It agitates, it reveals, it flees. You don't have to say a word. Your very existence is a confrontation to the corrupt. And this is exactly why you were hunted. The enemy did not attack your comfort. He attacked your character. Because he understood something you are only now beginning to fully grasp. If your heart stayed clean, your future stayed dangerous to darkness. Read that again. Let it land. The enemy attacked your heart, because if your heart stayed clean, your future stayed dangerous to darkness. He needed you bitter. He needed you cold and closed. He needed you to misuse your gifts in retaliation, to weaponize your pain against people, to close off your compassion and become another wounded soul wounding others. Because a broken vessel with gifts becomes a tool of destruction, but a purified vessel with gifts, that becomes a weapon of heaven. You are no longer merely surviving, chosen one. You are becoming something far more significant. You are becoming a vessel heaven can trust. Do you understand the magnitude of that? God doesn't trust his deepest assignments to the untested. He doesn't release his most sensitive missions to the unbothered. He watches. He waits. He sees who comes through the fire without the smell of smoke. And then he entrusts them with weight that changes generations. Think of Joseph. Pit, prison, palace. God did not skip the pit. God did not bypass the prison, because the man who sat on the throne of Egypt had to be someone the fire already knew, someone betrayal had already shaped, someone who looked power in the face and did not become corrupt, because corruption had already been given every opportunity to take root and failed. That is your testimony, not a testimony of perfection, a testimony of preservation. And now the trajectory shifts, from hunted to honored, from hidden to trusted, from wounded to weight-bearing. You are not the same person who entered this season, and you cannot go back. But more importantly, you do not need to, because what God now does with a person he can trust not to become corrupted, that is the last thing I need to tell you. Somebody listening needs to hear this right now. You are not merely recovering, you are being entrusted. Say it in the comments. God can trust my heart. Because what heaven releases next into the hands of someone it fully trusts, that is where this message is going, and you are not going to want to miss it. Let me ask you something nobody has dared to ask you directly. After everything they put you through, the betrayals, the backstabbing, the character assassinations, the spiritual warfare that hit you at your most faithful moments, why didn't you become what they needed you to become? Because, let's be honest, you had every weapon available to fight dirty. You knew their secrets, you knew their weaknesses. You had the intelligence, the discernment, the history. You could have exposed them, destroyed their reputations the same way they tried to destroy yours. You could have walked into bitterness and built a throne there. But you didn't. And that decision, that quiet, costly, unseen decision, is the reason heaven is not just watching you right now. Heaven is honoring you. Here's what most people never understand about spiritual warfare. The enemy was never primarily after your marriage, your finances, your health, your relationships, those were just the instruments. The real target was always your character, because a person whose character has been corrupted can never carry true kingdom authority. You can have gifts without character. You can have talent without integrity. But you cannot carry heaven's weight without a soul that has been tested and refused to bend. Zechariah 13:9 says it plainly. I will bring that group through the fire and make them pure. I will refine them like silver and purify them like gold. That wasn't metaphor. That was your biography. You were pressed, and what came out was oil. You were wounded, and you did not become wicked. You were lied on, and you did not become a liar. You were hunted, and you refused to become a predator. Every single attack revealed something the enemy desperately needed to destroy before it fully emerged: trustworthiness. Because here is the revelation that will change how you see your entire life. God does not release great authority to untested people. He never has. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness. Joseph spent years in a pit and a prison. David spent years running through caves, sleeping on cold ground, with a king's spear aimed at his heart. And Jesus himself, the Son of the living God, was tested in the wilderness for 40 days before one miracle was ever performed. Do you see it? The greater the assignment, the more savage the testing. And beloved, they came for you hard. That means what God placed inside you is not small. Now here's where I need you to really hear this, because this next truth is the one the enemy has been working overtime to keep you from understanding. When you suffered and stayed pure, you didn't just survive. You qualified. You became the rarest kind of person God can work through on this earth. Think about what you now carry because you refused corruption. You can carry influence without pride because you've been humbled in places no audience ever saw. You can carry discernment without cynicism because you've been betrayed, yet you chose to keep your heart open to God. You can carry authority without cruelty because you know what it feels like to have power used against you, and you refuse to become that. You can carry boundaries without hatred because your walls aren't built from rage, they're built from wisdom. You can carry honor without revenge, and that is perhaps the rarest thing walking on the face of this earth today. That combination does not come from a comfortable life. It cannot be downloaded, purchased, or inherited. It is forged in fire, in silence, in seasons when God seemed absent but was actually the most present he has ever been. Romans 5:3-4 says, We also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope. Not just hope for yourself, hope that you carry for others, because someone who has been to the bottom of the valley and climbed back up without losing their soul, that person becomes a lighthouse, and lighthouses don't exist for themselves. They exist so others don't crash. There are people assigned to your life in this next season who will only survive because you stayed pure. Their breakthrough is connected to your refusal to become bitter. Their healing is tied to your decision, in your darkest hour, to keep your hand in the hand of God. Now I want to speak directly to your soul, not to your mind, to your soul. Father, right now, I lift up every chosen one hearing this message. I ask you to reach into the deepest places of their being and pull out every residue of betrayal that still lives there. Sever the false guilt, the lie that says they should have seen it coming, that they were foolish for trusting, that their softness was weakness. It was never weakness. It was always anointing. Cleanse every thread of hypervigilance that has kept them scanning every room for danger. Restore the peace that passes understanding. Heal the grief that settled in quiet and stayed too long. Strengthen the holy boundaries that protect the sacred thing you placed inside them. Restore their voice, the voice that was silenced by those who feared what it carried. Release the vindication that is long overdue. Deepen the discernment that kept them alive through seasons designed to destroy them. And Lord, preserve their tenderness, but make them wise as serpents so the wolves can no longer enter through the same door twice. Now I commission you, chosen one, walk into your next chapter without shame, not with arrogance, not with bitterness toward those who tried to break you, but with the quiet, unshakable confidence of someone who has been through the furnace and came out without even the smell of smoke on their garments. Daniel 3, those 3 men walked out of the fire, and the king's own officials marveled, because not a hair on their heads was singed. The only thing that burned was the rope that bound them. That is your testimony right now. Everything that was meant to destroy you only burned the limitations off of you. They did everything they could to make you bitter, and heaven says you stayed clean. They tried to make your soul agree with darkness, and heaven says you refused. You are not weak because you stayed pure. You are rare, and what is rare on this earth is deeply, eternally honored in heaven. If this message spoke directly to your spirit, type "Heaven saw my purity" in the comments right now. Send this to someone who survived darkness without becoming it. They need to hear that heaven kept records. And if you are staying planted for this next season with God, subscribe and don't you move, because what comes next will show you exactly what your purity unlocked. Heaven's amazement has become heaven's endorsement, and your story is just beginning.